Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Prince Podcast here on podcastjuice.net. My name is Michael Dean, and boy, we got a round table today, so let's get things started. Joining me today, first off, is Mr. Big Sexy and Sax. Sir, how are you?
Oh, man, great. Productive week in court. Got some things happening music-wise. Let's get this rolling.
All right, and also joining us today is Mr. Ant Pooh. How are you doing, sir?
I'm a little sad. My Starfish and Coffee t-shirt was bleached, but my Podcast Juice t-shirt is still looking dope on me.
Oh, that's what's up.
Legacy.
Okay. Also joining us is Kanisa. Kanisa, how are you?
Good afternoon, beautiful day or afternoon in Atlanta. Hello, everybody.
All right, down in the ATL. And we've got a guest coming on today. Some of you may know him. Big Prince fan. He's definitely got a presence on Facebook, among other things. Mr. Rodney Fitzgerald. Sir, how are you?
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure.
All right, and just to put this out here, I'm connected with Rodney out in Minneapolis during the PRN alumni. It was good meeting you there, sir. All right, and we have a very special guest.
Great time.
Is a young lady that some of you may have heard about. She's inspired one of Prince's very iconic songs. The song is Little Red Corvette. So give us a round of applause virtually for Mei-Ling. How you doing, Mei-Ling?
I'm fine. How are you?
Now, I heard you was fine.
How is everyone? Everyone out there?
We good. We heard you was fine.
Good.
She was fine back in the day.
Okay. Yeah, the song kind of said everything, didn't it? A little bit too much.
Well, and let's just get right into it now. I know you have a book coming out, and I know some of the connections, but some of the people may not. And we wanted to talk about this today. Now, we don't want to give too much about the book coming up because you definitely want to save some of those great stories and things for that. Right. But give us a background on Mei-Ling, Prince, and Little Red Corvette. Let's start right there.
Okay. Well, I actually am from St. Paul. I grew up there, born and raised, and I was in the same circles as, early, like with T.C. Ellis. His house was a couple blocks from our church, and he taught me how to ride motorcycles. And I knew David since I was 12, I think. And so I was always kind of in the mix. And I said that because Sue Ann Carwell was his sister, his foster sister. Ah. So anyway, I actually met Prince in 1976 when I was 16. And you may have heard me talk about my friend Deanie or Lady Virgo. One night I had a car and she didn't. And she said, we got to go to this party. And I said, what party? She said, there's a New Year's Eve party over in I think it was in Bloomington, Minneapolis. And it was at a hotel. It wasn't at a club because somebody else said, well, she was in a club, but whatever. And went to the party, and her whole purpose for taking me there was to meet Prince. Now, I was in love with my first love. And I wasn't really interested in meeting anybody. But she said, you got to go meet Prince. You're both short. You would make a cute couple.
Now let me ask you this real quick. He was just the local Prince. He wasn't like the recording star.
Well, he had
Prince,
his first album out.
It was out at this. Okay, it was out.
Yeah, he had his first album. There was rumors and talk about, this genius, kid, and I really hadn't heard about him until she told me. Okay. I met Michael Jackson when I was 14. I went backstage to meet him, but I wasn't really like the groupie type. So I had heard things about Prince, but I had never met him or anything. And she really, I believe, was the first person. And she said, girl, he's 5'2" and you're 5'2", and y'all would make a cute couple. And I said, okay. And she really wanted me to take her because she wanted to go. I wasn't even supposed to be there. We had to sneak the car. I snuck my mother's car. We literally rolled it out of the driveway and went over there. And then I met him, and she took me up to him, and I think he was playing, I can't remember if it was drums or keyboards because I saw him around town a lot playing in different clubs, but I can't remember what. I think he was playing, well, it could have been keyboards. One time I saw him playing drums, though. But she introduced us during a break, and he just gave me them big eyes, and just kind of looked at me and smiled, and I looked at him. And, it was kind of innocent. And I was 16, and, he waits until people turn 18 anyway, so he went out to mess with me.
Stop.
He was 2 years older than me, so.
Wow.
That's how we met. And then I used to see him around the lake at Lake Calhoun because I was a roller skater. And, we had lakes every direction of our house. But in Minneapolis, that was the place to go. That was like where people would go and the boom boxes would come on and everybody would be out there in their cars. And, the pimps would be out there, the roller skaters, everybody. And I had seen him and Andre walking around the lake quite a few times. And I had seen Andre around, too.
Okay.
But that was 16.
Now let me stop you for, because I just want to put some things in the context. So this is what you said. This was what 79 or something like that.
76.
76. Now,
so maybe he didn't have his album out.
Okay.
But I think he had already created it, and he was shopping a deal. Because I don't know, for some reason, when did he actually sign his deal? Was it 77?
Don't date me, but it could have been around that at that time. But here's what I wanted to ask you though.
Okay.
Because you say you seen him. This is for my players. Let me talk to my players, right? So you can get a good idea, and my people's out there. Now, back in the days, and this is not about me, but back in the days in Seattle, at least, and this is probably in every neighborhood, every area, there was always, and excuse my language, but I'm gonna do like Moore said, there was always that fine woman.
Oh God, where are you going, Michael?
It was always, there was that one in our area was this girl named Paula, and you said that if you said her name, it would ring out. A lot of people were like, "Oh, you know about Paula? Yeah, she bad, man. Yeah, okay, yeah, I know who you're talking about." So I can only go by pictures. So you let me know, and I'm not trying to big yourself up, but you, Mei-Ling, were a very beautiful young woman at you know what I mean?
Oh,
like
thank you.
You I imagine you was probably catching a lot of eyeballs. People was eyeballing back then. Like, let's keep it 100. As
yeah,
we like to say. You know,
fighting them off. Okay. Really, literally fighting them off. From the time I was 12 years old.
Yeah, you was like that real. You was one of the bad ones out there. And I'm gonna use your word. You said red bone. They was calling you red. Now back in
God, they called me Little Red. There were names, Little Red, Red Bone, and of course Mulatto, and all those other terms that I didn't like.
And back in those days, in the community, the light skin was in. Now let's not
right,
play
and
around.
They called us Red. They did call us Red, so that could even be a hint to the name of the song. Okay. I mean, I feel differently about the song, but again, I'll save that for the book. But yeah, I think that had something to do with it.
So all I was saying is you was fine as hell back then. Okay. Now go ahead and tell your story.
You. I'm looking for that girl, by the way. I wish I could go back and find her. Oh, well.
But I did have one quick question, because you mentioned that you synced up with Prince when he was really young. And as far as his vibe, like everyone talks about how he's like a magical vortex of Prince, how much of that was around back then?
Oh, it was there. He was a hot mess. He was. He had a lot of confidence with his music, but you could tell that he was lacking confidence with women. He was shy. And the first time we met, how do I want to put this? Be careful how I word things. When I was at the club, the Foxtrot, I've told everybody that this was 2 weeks after the Capri Theater, which I think is really interesting because, the Capri Theater situation didn't go well for him. And I think he may, and this is my opinion, I think he may have been kind of down and, pulling himself back together and whatever, because initially he was going to go on tour and they held the tour up, if you remember, because they needed more practice time or whatever. So I was at the Foxtrot dancing. This is in 79, so I was 18. And I was out on the floor, which I was a lot of times because I would dance by myself and, I would be in dance contests and whatever. And he and Andre came in that night, and I was with Lady Virgo. And he was just kind of looking at me and staring at me, and I look at him. Of course, he look away. That's his thing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he just ran out there and started dancing with me. And there's a whole story behind it. It's hilarious. But that's kind of how, I don't know if he knew I was 18, but that's how it went, And he just went out on the dance floor and started dancing with me. And back then, he wasn't a very good dancer, I might add. I mean, I'm not giving him any shade, but he just was all over the place. Think about American Bandstand. That's what I was dealing with. So he was everywhere. And at the time, Freak was in, the dance Freak, La Freak or whatever. So it was very intimate dance that he was doing with me, and I didn't even really know him. So it was really funny. And he asked me for my number, and it all started right there and then.
So, wow, this is the early Prince. You was out there dancing by yourself. So he was that. So you trying to say he was that brother who just ran up on you and started freaking up on you?
Well, the way I say it in the book, and I'll give you this, is that when him and Andre walked in, it was like a Charlie Murphy skit. There was smoke and lights and everything. It was funny. It was just really funny. But the DJ was talking about them and playing some of the music, and I don't remember if I'm pretty sure it was the first. Well, it was the first album. Yeah, he was playing some of the music from the first album.
All right.
But I don't know. Yeah. So that's how we met.
Okay. And
officially, how we got together.
All right. How long, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want, if it's for the book, but how long did that sort of, you first met to, and was there a point where you guys were dating or? Like, buy the book, no?
Moving right along here.
Let's just say she was too fast. Okay?
Oh boy. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I get it. That brings us up to the song then.
Yeah, we had an immediate attraction. Right.
All right. Say that. Oh.
Well, really, he was just a hot mess, and I was like, "Who is this dude? I have to know him." He came for me. I mean, really, he came out there and he asked me for his number, but. When I hesitated to give him my number, and then I thought, he's just, he was just a mess. I'm not saying that in a negative way either. He was just hard to figure out. I didn't know if he was gay. I didn't know if I'm serious. I mean, he was sort of feminine, and I just said, well, I'm going to get to know him. I don't know what the deal is, so,
There was something about it that fascinated you, though.
There was something about him, exactly. Yeah. And we had a lot of talks, and we had so much in common. We had so much in common, and you'll find about that, all about that in the book. I mean, we had a spiritual connection throughout his life and my life, through the music.
Wow. Okay.
He was sending me messages through his music, no joke. And I was oblivious to most of it. Not all of it. Some of it was in my face, but I was oblivious to a lot of it because, I left. So
I know some of these answers, so I want to be very careful in terms of, I know you want to leave these things for book, but talk to us about Little Red Corvette, because you have talked about this before.
I have.
And other things. So can you share that story with us, or just a connection
Yes, I will. I left in 80. I left Minnesota in 80. I didn't tell anybody, including Prince, where I was going. There were some really troublesome things going on in my life, and I had to leave. I left. And Prince was looking for me. He was asking about me. I found these, and I'll leave that. But I left. And in 85, I left and went to KU, University of Kansas, and studied journalism there. And because I was at the University of Minnesota when we first met. So, I don't say that. Okay, so I found out in 85. And I found out from a close friend of his. And I'm not going to reveal who that is. But it's T.C. Ellis is another person. So I found out by more than one person is what I'm saying to you. And I found out in '85 because that person was having a conversation with me, and I knew about Sexy Dancer. I mean, Prince never told me about Sexy Dancer, but everybody back home told me, you know, Prince wrote Sexy Dancer about you. And I'm like, I don't know. Did he? I don't know. But, you know, they used to call me Fancy Dancer back in the day. And so, I don't know, just a lot of people told me that were, you know, in his circle. And I thought, well, probably then. And now I know for sure because some other things came out. But back then I really didn't. I really wasn't concerned. And so I met this person and they said, oh, by the way, did you know that Prince wrote Little Red Corvette about you? And I'm like, no. And I was trying to think of the lyrics at the time. And I listened to the music and I listened to the lyrics, you know, because I was dancing to the beat like everybody else. It was a great song. And I thought, oh, God, that's so cold. Why would he do that? You know, I felt like it was mean. You know, he was retaliating. There were things in there that I knew the whole story was about things that we did. But I had never listened to it with that more mature ear, you know what I mean, Michael? And of course, the jockeys on the wall, everybody knows, well, a lot of people know now, there were jockeys on my wall. And one of them just did an interview and told you guys, and that's Mike Hercules Weaver, who was a heavyweight champ. And so that was one of the clues for me, because he saw those jockeys on my wall when he went to my house. And
slow it down, and because I'm slow.
Okay, slow it down.
Bring me down. So if you can, break down some of those lyrics. So
I don't have them in front of me, but when I went to the place where her horses run free, which was my house, I saw all the jockeys that were there before me.
And you mentioned this guy's name, Michael. He was a heavyweight fighter.
Mike Hercules Weaver was a heavyweight champ. He had Ali's title.
Yeah, I remember him.
From 80 to 82, I think. There's a story, and I've already told it. And Mike and I, with Darren's story from Low Key, we did a little, you know, audio that is on my page. And Mike talks about meeting Prince. And I've never said that Prince and I were like, you know, one-on-one relationship. We, for lack of a better word, were kicking it. You know, we had a relationship.
Okay.
It wasn't like I went home to meet mama and all that stuff. It wasn't like that. But we had an intense, passionate relationship while it lasted. And so Mike Weaver was in town and you may know this, Big Sexy, for a fight with Scott LeDoux, which was Minneapolis's great white hope at the time.
Oh, yes.
And I was at the university. I'm hearing feedback, so I don't know if you guys are hearing feedback.
No, you're good.
But I was at the University of Minnesota, and I was in this organization called United Action Organization. This guy named Bill Paul had started, actually, he was one of the first people to start amateur women's boxing. Okay? So we had some of the first fights were in St. Paul, and we had the first female boxing commissioner. Her name was Judy Clammer. And me being in PR and communications, they wanted me to be in this organization and help them because they were trying to get sanctioned by the Amateur Athletic Union in Las Vegas. And I've told all this before. So I was like working 2 jobs, a paper route, going to college and doing these organizations. Not really a paper route, but you know what I mean. So we're supposed to go to this event that Muhammad Ali is putting on. And we wanted the girls to weigh in to give them credibility because they were amateur boxers. So that's how this whole boxing thing with me started. I wasn't a boxing groupie or anything. And so I go there and I meet Mike Weaver. And the date is in October something, November. I had to pull out my date book. But anyway, so we meet and Mike is like smitten with me and he talks about that. And his manager's like, no, you need to stay away from her. This fight's about to happen in a week. And he wanted to take me out to eat. And I was like, well, you know, we'll do it after your fight is over, whatever. So anyway, long story short, Mike wins the fight. And that night, he asked me to go to dinner, and I did. And he said, what's going on in St. Paul or Minneapolis? And I said, well, there's an after party from some of the athletes from the U, because, of course, I was at the U. Trent Tucker and all those guys were at the U. And so they wanted me to bring Mike over there because they knew I knew him because, they're athletes. So I took him to this house party. Now, I have never seen Prince at a house party in Minneapolis. I had friends and boyfriends in both sides, so I could go between St. Paul and Minneapolis. Some guys over St. Paul really didn't go to Minneapolis, especially on the north side, because there was this, this thing. And so I was there, and we're leaving, and it's cold. It's really cold that night. And the steps are slippery because it's a duplex, and it was on Elliott. I still have the address in my date book. And so as we're walking down the steps, Mike decides, now he's Hercules, right, to pick me up so I don't fall because the steps are really slick and I have on high heels. As we're walking down, who opens the frickin' door? Prince and Andre Simone. It was like a Charlie Murphy moment, I swear to God. And so Mike looks up, Prince looks up, and he's like, oh, no, she is not with this guy. I could just see that on his face. And Michael and I were not dating. We were just friends. I'm not saying he didn't want to date me, but we weren't. And as we were walking down the stairs, him and Andre were walking up, he put me down. It was so awkward, you guys. It was so awkward. And so I said, Michael, Prince, this is Mike Hercules Weaver and Andre, and they shook hands, and that was it. And as we're walking down, we go outside, Mike said, who was that little dude? He looked at me like he wanted to kill me. Is that your boyfriend? Oh, I had forgotten the story until Mike told me. There's so much stuff I had forgotten. And then later, years later, his brothers are triplets, and Big Sexy, you may know them. And they're triplet, and they were boxers, and they were at a club. I don't know what the club was, Candy or something in L.A., and Prince was there, and they met him, and they said, hey, man, have you ever met my brother? And Prince told them, yeah, I met your brother. That was the jockey on the wall. That was one of them. There was a picture of Ali on the wall. There was pictures of other people that I knew.
You knew Ali?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
So let me get this right. You walked into the party in St. Paul with, at the time, the heavyweight boxing champion of the world.
Well, at the time, he had just won the United States. I think he took Ledoux's title, which was the United States Championship. Wow. So he was a number one contender. And it was a party actually in Minneapolis. Oh, and like I said, I never saw Prince at any parties. And I would go because I went to school in Minneapolis at the U. And so I knew all these people. Trent Tucker played for the Bulls. He played for the New York Knicks. They were all in college back then. What was that guy's name? There was a bunch of them. But anyway, so there was like another athlete on the wall that was a Viking, but I was not into athletes, really. I wasn't, because I was so little. I just really wasn't into the big, bulky type.
Hey.
I'm sorry, but back then I was just little. I was like 5'2" and big as a minute. And so, I'm not saying that in a negative light, but you know how some women are looking for athletes? That wasn't my thing. But years later, as Mike says, and then after Mike won, he was the number one contender, and then he fought Tate, right?
Yes.
Right, and he won. And so then he became the heavyweight champion of the world. And here's a funny story, and I've told this. Okay, so all of this happened, right? So Prince had been gone. I think he was out in L.A. recording some of the music from the second album, which... there are songs on there about me. And so he had already done that. He was back, if my memory serves me right. Don't hold me to it because I have to go back and check my facts. But either way, the day after the fight, we were going to Las Vegas because we were going to try to get women's boxing sanctioned, the amateur level sanctioned. And they had made me the vice president of the International Women's Amateur Boxing Association that we had at the school. I mean, this is a huge deal. And I think really the history has been left. I have talked to the Boxing Association about it, and they have some of the records. We have all the records. We have everything. But anyway, so I was leaving. So Mike said, oh, wow, I'm going to be at the Sugar Ray Leonard fight out there, so we can see each other. And I'm like, okay. Again, we were friends. So the next day, I go to Vegas with my group from the U, and we're just frantically writing, preparing stuff, trying to get sanctioned or some sort of credibility for these women boxers so that they could get breast protection, they could have referees. I mean, all this stuff, it's kind of like it was between a civil rights thing, women's rights. It was a lot of stuff, reasons why I got involved. So Mike was there. And so Mike sees me and we're done with our thing. And he says, you want to go see Sugar Ray Leonard and Benitez fight? And I'm like, yeah. That was like the fight of the century.
That was a good fight.
That was a good fight. So Mike decides, and I've told this story, that he wants to go. I said, I want to get a T-shirt that says Mike Weaver, like something, and promote you. Because, I was promoting people from day one, right? That's what I do. That's my business. And so we go to get these, like, green sweatshirts is all they had. And on the front, it says, I had him put Mike Weaver. I didn't know on the back it said, I'm his. So he decides... He decides he's going to get a shirt with my name on it, Mei-Ling, this Chinese name. And on the back, it says, I'm hers. Now, I haven't even kissed this man. So we're sitting the third row or something like that at the fight, and we are being videotaped with these shirts on. So later, Mike tells Darren in the interview that he did it intentionally so he could claim me. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, you got chosen.
I got chosen. So then what makes it even weirder is we take a picture. I don't know. Sugar was there. Sugar Ray was there and some other people. But he had left and there were 3 girls and me and Mike sitting down. And we took this photo and I have it. And I didn't never remember who the girls were. I thought one of them was Andre's sister. Well, it turns out they were all Andre's sisters. So think about that. Prince sees me with this guy walking down the stairs, carrying me. Then he gets Andre's sisters get back because they're doing his clothes and working with him, I'm sure. And they say, well, we saw Mei-Ling with Mike Weaver. And so I didn't even find this out till years later, but Andre said all 3 of those girls are my sisters. And so there's this iconic picture with me and Mike. He's wearing my shirt. I'm wearing his shirt and Andre's sisters. And I just think it's funny because I had no clue. No clue. And then Mike and I really didn't start dating until I went to L.A. with him for a couple of weeks. A week or a weekend or something. And then we started dating. And then he asked me to marry him and asked me to go to the fight in Africa. And he talks about me. He says I broke his heart. But, I was trying to get my education together. So that's what I did.
Okay, heartbreaker.
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I don't know if you guys get it, but it was kind of funny because I'm sure he was thinking the wrong things at the whole time, But yeah, I was mad about the song. I was really angry. I thought he, was kind of dogging me out, and I'm not saying I wasn't fast, but what always bothers me about that song is it's kind of chauvinistic because, again, when women have more than one partner, it's one thing. When men do, it's another thing. So, that's the way it goes. But I had a lot of issues back then and things that I was dealing with that will come forward in the book. And I was sort of like Prince in the sense that I was kind of disconnected from love. Oh, okay. So I'll leave it at that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's interesting. You said that you felt it was kind of chauvinistic, and I can't tell you how to feel, but I'm just curious. You didn't take it as a badge of honor that maybe that all these men were chasing after you in the least bit.
No, and I don't want to go into that because it'll kind of reveal. And I'll just say this, and I hope people don't think I'm full of myself. Being pretty can be a curse, too.
I'd love to have that curse.
No, I mean, when you have a lot of attention from men, older men, and you're young, things happen. You know, it's not always pretty.
Wow. Understood.
It's not always pretty. And so, yeah.
I hear it in your voice.
So no, it was kind of like, I'll give you one example. And this is a true story. My sister will vouch for this. We would ride around, you know, we would ride our bicycles, and I would ride my bicycle and I would walk around the lake, and you know, hot pants were in, right? Everybody was wearing them. Everybody. Well, one day I'm walking down the street with hot pants on, and this guy runs up onto the pole and almost crashes into the pole. And seriously, it's a true story. And I was like, what? And then he's screaming out the window after he rolled his car up on the pole. And I was like, wow, that's scary. You know, and so, you know, everybody that wore hot pants didn't have that. But when you have a certain kind of curvy Corvette body, then, you know, when you're a little girl, you really don't realize it. Do you know what I mean? When you're
all that ass.
Right. Yeah. Right. When you're 12 or 13 years old, your mind is not prepared for that.
True. Man.
So that's kind of how it was.
You had cats crashing into poles.
Yeah, this dude did. I don't know who he was. I was running. I was like getting out of there.
Threw it. What did he say? What did Tony M say? Threw it up in the air.
It turned to sunshine.
I'm stupid. I'm sorry, Mei-Ling.
But man, so cats was thirsty back then too. Good Lord.
When I was from the research that I was doing with the book, I went back because I lived in Virginia for a year in Reston, Virginia. My parents were going through a divorce. And so my mom sent me to live with my aunt there. And so I lived there, and I went to school at Herndon Intermediate High School. Herndon Intermediate, I guess it was an intermediate school, like a junior high. And I read some of these things that the boys said, that they wrote, you know, digging through my library. And I'm like, these dudes were in 8th grade. They were saying, take care of that bottom. And then there were some that said, keep the engines in shape. And one guy said, just know that you are the most beautiful girl I've ever met. And he signs it with his name as P something. And it freaked me out because it almost looked like Princess P. And I'm going to put those in the book. They're real people, you know. And I thought about that. I thought, dang. So they were always doing this, even when I was just, well, how old are you when you're in the 8th grade? What, 13, 14?
Yeah, right around there.
Right. So from the time I was 12, there's a theme that runs through the book that I put in the beginning. And my grandfather, who was a Pentecostal preacher, and he was also a civil rights leader. He was the head of human rights for the city of St. Paul and one of the first, good friends with Hubert Humphrey, married to an Italian woman. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of interracial and things going on in our family, and there was a lot of civil rights talk around the table, and he was a Pentecostal preacher. And so one day he pulled me aside. I think I was 12, and he said, you know, Mei-Ling, you're a beautiful young girl, and you're a magnet. Be careful who you attract.
Wow. Let me ask you this question. Now, were your parents together during this time?
My parents were together. They got divorced when I was 14.
Okay. What? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't know if I want to go into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, and again, you don't have to answer. You say move it along. I mean, do you maintain a relationship with your father during the? Yeah. My father was in the Korean War. Oh, okay.
So, and he had 4 Bronze Stars, so you can figure out what kind of situation he went through.
Got you.
Right.
So it kind of sounds like, and maybe we can tie this a little bit in today too, but and this was back in the days, you know, and it sounded like there was the heavy sort of sexualization, if that's a word, of a young lady and, you know, grown ass men, you know, sort of approaching you.
Right.
Like, how do you think it is today? Because now it's like, you know, the sex and the women's bodies and all of that is so way out there in terms of how it's pushed and things. Like, how do you think it compares to today? And what would you say to young women today that may have these bodies that are attracting the attention of grown-ass men?
Oh, gosh, I don't even know where to start. How should I answer this? I will say that my book, and the whole reason I'm writing this book is because there are people who know me, who know my story and my challenges, that have said, you have to tell your story because you can heal a lot of people, you can help a lot of young people. And it was hard to do that. And just because you wear hot pants doesn't mean somebody needs to try to do something to you or to try to mistreat you or treat you like an object, a sexual object. I really get upset when I hear people say, well, she shouldn't have been walking around with that dress on, with that slit up the side. Well, that's perfectly someone's right, but you don't need to be, looked at as a sex object because of that. But it really didn't matter what I wore. I mean, I couldn't hide the assets. And so, it was just one of those things that I constantly had to deal with. And as a matter of fact, and I will say this, I went to Flight Time's picnic one year. I think it was 91 or 92. And that's when I reconnected with Jerome because I hadn't seen him in a long time. And I was working with Darren Story from the group Low Key, and he was signed with Jimmy and Terry at the time. And I hadn't been back. I hadn't seen them since probably 1980. And I went to the picnic. And Karen White was there because I think Terry, she was pregnant actually. And, the whole crew, I think Crush, the group from Low Key. And I went to the picnic and I see Jimmy and Jimmy Jam and, I see Jimmy Jam and Terry and all them when I go in and I go, hey, Jimmy, do you remember me? And he said, Mei-Ling, nobody ever forgets you. And, I took it at the time. I was like, yeah. There's a lyric that Prince says in one of his songs that he says that. He says, no one ever forgets you, least of all. I think it's called Least. It says, no one ever forgets you, least of all, not me, or something like that. So, I'm sorry, you're hearing a little noise. My husband just came home. But I forget, I lost my train of thought. Michael, bring me back.
Oh, you were talking about the Flight Time picnic. Your husband came
so I
in,
went to the picnic and I hadn't seen Jimmy Jam and Terry since, gosh, like I said, 80. And back in the day, Jimmy used to spin records. I mean, he was a DJ and it just goes way back. But that's what he said to me. And I said, oh, wow, okay, you remember me. So that's kind of like, and I say that, and I say it's kind of sad. I think I said that to City Pages when he asked me about my behind, and Prince wrote the lyrics, and I said, yeah, it's kind of sad that the only reason why they remembered me was because of my behind or because I was, dancing and all of those things. But guys, you guys are guys, so like you said, you always remember that girl or that person who was out there. And I really like to dress too. Clothes were a big part of me, part of my life. And so, I don't know.
No, it's a real thing, and as a man, I'll be honest, like, it's men, some of us, I'll say some of us, we see a nice young lady or whatever age you are, and she, she's got things that are attractive to you. Yeah, it's gonna jump out at you. That's just
right.
And some of us have been raised in with things where that type of stuff is, heralded. Oh man, you see her ass, or you see a titty, or her hair. You know what I mean? So we come from a very objectified sort of situation. That's not an excuse, but it's just an honest thing to say. That is, I don't know if that's a weakness. It's just some things that we wrestle with. But at the same point, kind of what I hear, and I have a daughter and daughters, so I'm cognizant that we have to be careful, and women in our life, that they're not just objects, sexual objects. That's all we see, and we don't understand they're people just as we are, and
right,
to
right,
even
who
sort of
have
have
feelings and who have emotions, and
exactly,
and then you include that with broken family, and the man in your life is not there to build you up, your dad, and then you get all of these men that are building you up and showing you love, and you didn't get that love from your father. And a lot of girls, I mean, I'm not the only girl that ever had that happen. There's a lot of broken marriages, so that can sort of facilitate things and open her up. Especially if she's a young girl whose grandfather is a Pentecostal preacher, and she's, not really experienced in, I didn't live in the hood, I lived in a suburb, and, all of those things. I wasn't streetwise at the time.
And so you get thrown in sort of this environment, you're not really up on a lot of game and understanding what some of these stuff.
No, not really.
You're right. No, I feel it. I was going to say something, kind of lost my train of thought, but it's interesting hearing it from your perspective, because, again, like I said, in today's world, somewhat it might be flipped a little bit, but there's always still that sort of objectification that we deal with, low-key, not so low-key. You can see that in sort of Prince's music and stuff, but again, I think it's just an organic, sort of natural place, because that's what the environment was. A lot of people will look at Purple Rain, the movie, and have issues with how women are seen in that movie, rightfully so. But I don't think their heart was in the wrong place. But again, it's just a reflection of.
But don't get me wrong, I'm not putting his music down.
No, I'm not.
I mean, I get where he was going with it, and he has said when in his early years, things have changed. He grew up, but my point was that I heard those lyrics and I was like, oh hell no. Right. Why would he write that? And then, baby, you're moving too fast. You need to slow down. Da 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 da. She had a pocket full of horses, Trojans, and some of them used. Are you freaking kidding me? I was livid. If I would have seen Prince, I probably would have went for him. I was really angry. I mean, because people took that as, this girl's running around. She's a hoe. And she's got a pocket full of used condoms, even though he didn't say condoms.
Right.
Okay. So for me, I was trying to figure out, I know I left and I know I didn't say goodbye. We were off and on. But why would he do that? Why would he say that about me? Retaliation? I was really, really angry, to the point where that was his biggest song. Okay. I told very few people. There have been people that said, well, she ain't the real Little Red Corvette, because why wouldn't she tell everybody back then in the day? Why would you? I was trying to be a journalist. I was married. I had just gotten married in 1983, and I had a baby a year later, and I had a career, and my husband was in a career and a respectable, and I wasn't trying to go out there and say, hey, look at me, I'm Little Red Corvette, the nasty girl from the song. Right? Is anybody hear me there?
Oh,
yeah, so that's why I didn't tell everybody. Now, people knew me, but, and I told some random people later, but it wasn't until 2003 or 4 when I decided that I was going to write a book about Minneapolis. And there have been people that said she waited till Prince died and she came out and tried to write a book. Why didn't she do it when he was alive? Well, that is not true. And I have proof. I have a letter I wrote to his lawyer. I have T-shirts that I had on at Paisley Park. Prince knew I was writing a book. He told some of his band members, well, don't talk to her. Why? Because I didn't sign a confidentiality agreement. And I knew things. Okay? But I'm not that kind of person. I'm a positive person. So my book was going to be about all of the people involved in the Minneapolis sound. And it was going to be a tribute really to him. And I was going to tell the stories about, what are these people doing with their lives now? Perfect example, T.C. Ellis. TC has a school, a charter school for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it facilitates, the whole thing, his musical experience and everything. And there's other people that have done things that were positive. That's what I was doing. Things happened in our relationship that I blamed Prince for, and I later found out he had nothing to do with it. And so, that's the bad part of this whole story, I guess, is that I didn't find out until later that he wasn't responsible for something that happened that really kind of changed our relationship, because I don't know what it could have been like. Who knows?
Talk to us if you can. Can you share like that when you went to a Prince concert later on?
Right. So in 2003, I started getting the book stuff together. Actually, it probably was even before that, because I was in grad school and I was getting my master's in communications from 2000. I graduated in 2001. Something like that, from grad school. So I had started, like, in my grad project, I have a whole synopsis on there about the book. So that's why I know I was thinking about it. And then I interviewed like 50 people, including Chaka Khan, some of the band members, Matt Fink, all these people back then for this book. Mm-hmm. I told some of these people I was the Little Red Corvette back then. Okay? So in 2004, so 2003, right? 2004. This is really crazy, but you remember the promo for Little Red Corvette that came out that said it was like a radio thing, and they switched it, and it was the promo for the actual concert, and it played musicology, and then it had the radio thing where they're switching the channels.
Yeah. And
it switched, and it was Little Red Corvette and I want to say Kiss. And I'm not sure if it was Sexy Dancer, but it was Kiss, Little Red Corvette, and maybe, I don't remember the other one. When I heard that, I felt that Prince was sending me a message. Now, I know people are going to think this chick is crazy, but I really did. And I have read since that maybe some fans or somebody had picked these songs to go in there. But when I heard Little Red Corvette, I felt like it's time for me to go see Prince. Okay, now, people don't believe this either. I never went to a concert. After I left Minnesota, I didn't go to any Prince concerts. None. Part of that was because I had this, thing that was going on with me and him that was unresolved. And I tried to go to one night alone, but I had kids and something came up and I can't remember, and I didn't go. And then I lived in Maryland. I lived in Kansas City. I lived in Oklahoma. And, so anyway, I said, I'm going to join the fan club. So I joined the fan club. And of course, I saw Prince on TV performing and all these things, and I would hear the song in the elevator or at a store shopping. And it's weird when you hear songs about yourself when you're at TJ Maxx. I mean, it's just crazy. But anyway, I went to the website. I bought the ticket and the tickets. And they didn't tell you until the day of, where your ticket was. So the day of, and I think it was April 6th, 2004 in Oklahoma City. And we had front row center seats. Front row center seats. I was like, oh no. So I decided I was going to make a sign. And people laugh and go, she carried some big old sign. No, I printed a piece of paper from my copy machine. I made a sign that said, Prince, remember me. I'm Mei-Ling Stone from St. Paul. And I had two of them. One was red and one was blue and red or something. So I put them in my husband's suit pocket. I had them in his pocket or somewhere. And then when we got to the concert, I held it up when Prince came out. And I'm, of course, 5'2". And so my husband takes it and he holds it up higher. And Prince sees it. And the look on his face is, I have pictures, in the video. And he sees it and he's stunned. There's one part that's not in there, and the one part where he actually puts his finger to his head, and he goes, let me see. like, can I remember you? And he's blushing really bad. And these girls behind us are trying to snatch the sign from my husband, who's 6'2". And they were like, who is that girl? What does it say? And he notices, and then he goes off and comes back later. And then he gets, I don't know if he has this look of, and then he gets down on one knee kind of and points at me. And then he's singing that song, Shh. And he shreds the guitar. I say he was running around the stage like a little rooster. It was so cute. And, he points to me and says, this is for you. And then he shreds the guitar. And it was very emotional. And that was the first time that he played Little Red Corvette when I was there. Mm. But he couldn't look at me. So he put his back to me. And my memory is he turned around one time. And he said something when he turned around. But of course, that film is missing. They can't find it at Paisley. And he got very emotional. So, whatever. It is what it is. So, there was not a dry eye in the house, including me. It was a very emotional song. It was acoustic.
Wow.
And so, he came to the front of the stage where I was, and he sang some words from some other songs, which I'll say for the book, where my husband said, whoa, what was that? And so I think he even gave me some other information, because that's how Prince does things, And I was actually writing. I'm a journalist, so I was writing about that concert, and I wrote about it for 2 papers, one in the Kansas City Globe and one for the paper in Oklahoma here, a smaller paper than the Oklahoman. I wrote for the Oklahoman for 6 years, but I was writing for the Edmond Sun, and I wrote the story about, how he was a fan, but, I didn't mention that I dated him because it wasn't professional. Back then to say that, I don't know. I just didn't do it. I didn't say that we dated. I said I was a friend. And it was interesting. And he asked me, they pulled me up on stage to dance, but then he ran from me. He wouldn't dance with me. And I asked a friend why. And he said, well, because he was on mic and he knows you. Tell him what you would have said. True. But I danced up there on stage, and I say in the article, wow, now I know what it feels like to be Prince. Mm. All the people screaming your name, and it was really an overwhelming feeling, and I've been on stage, I've done things, I've had a radio show, I've had TV, but to be there and to know this guy when he was, just a baby. We were babies, and what he was trying to do and to see what he did, it was emotional.
I can imagine. Before we wrap up, I want to make sure any of you guys and ladies and gentlemen have any questions you wanted to get off.
No questions?
All right. Well, damn.
Silence?
Well, I have one. I'm just curious. What is your opinion on, because I know when people hear this, there's a very vocal and dedicated Prince hardcore fan base that's going to hear this and say, oh, hell no, she don't know what she's talking about. I heard that Prince was sleeping in an Edsel, Lisa's Edsel, when he wrote Little Red Corvette. So she lied. She just trying to come up.
Right.
I'm just curious. That story has been, urban legend for a while now. What are your opinions on that? And, how do you...
Hey, all I can tell you is that he could have been dreaming about me in her car. He could have been dreaming about us. But Prince, in his own words, said in Neil Carlin's article, in his home, that he wrote all of 1999 in this corner of the house. Mm. He said that in Neil Carlin's article, who wrote for Rolling Stone magazine. He said, I wrote all of 1999 in this corner right here. Now, could he have been dreaming up the song in the car? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean it wasn't inspired by our relationship. All I can tell you is when someone tells you that you're like a limousine, you do not forget that. You do not forget that. Among other things he has told me in our relationship, you do not forget that. So I immediately knew, from some of the things that were said. It's a very graphic song, if you guys haven't heard. And then at the end of the song, he says, I don't know if you've heard it, but it's in the long version, and I didn't hear it until recently. My sister brought it to my attention. And it says, you do things to me that keep me in an invariable sweat. I want to do things to you so you will never forget. He's mad. And then he goes, Mayday, Mayday. Well, my nickname was May.
You're talking about the 12-inch version, the long version, yeah.
Right. He says, Mayday, Mayday. So I don't know, but I know about the limousine because he told me that. And there's some other things in there where he's talking about, baby, have you got enough gas? There's a situation in that's not even related to, well, it's going to be in the book. Oh. I mean, the whole thing is about some of our relationships. And, I mean, I'm not going to fight with people if they think it's about vanity, but, that's whatever. I know who it's about. I interviewed Vanity. I asked her, did she have jockeys on her wall? And she didn't know what a jockey was. And it's on tape. Okay, so I love Vanity. I had a great conversation with her, like 2 hours. But the Little Red Corvette is about a girl from his hometown. When he was a vulnerable person, by the time he was doing Purple Rain and all that other stuff, he was not that same Prince. He was very sure of himself, and he had women coming out of everywhere. So, I don't know how to respond to what other people say. I can just tell you what I feel, what I was told by people close to him. He told T.C. Ellis when they were making his album. He told him. He said, did you write Little Red Corvette about Mei-Ling? And he said, yes. Now, you can take that up with T.C.
There you go.
He's known T.C. since before T.C. and Prince were babysat when they were little kids together by Prince's mother's twin sister, who lived 3 doors down from T.C. Ellis. There are things that people don't know. Mm-hmm. And then there were jockeys. That was a clear clue. But again, for me personally, when someone tells you it's like a limousine, you don't forget. No one has ever told me that since. And, so I don't know. Vanity was a beautiful girl, and I enjoyed our conversation. She could have inspired it as well. I don't know. But I can just tell you about the story itself. And again, there is Mike Weaver. He's a jockey. So I don't know what to say about it. I can't defend it. I mean, if people want to believe what they want to believe, but, there are things that I'm not telling you that are going to be in the book that will validate it even more. But okay. I'm not trying to prove it to anybody.
I hear that.
Really.
I hear that. How far along are you on the book?
I'm really far. It's just I'm kind of a perfectionist about things, and I've been finding out more and more information, and I'm so glad I took my time because people have come forward and given me information, and I remembered stuff that I had forgotten. And, I think the book is about my life, number one. It's the Little Red Corvette woman behind the song, which tells about this young girl who Prince met when she was 16, and then they dated when she was 18 and 19, and then she left. And then what happened after she left, and why she left, and what went on during that time, and what makes up the possible feeling that Prince had of calling her fast, slow down, fast. You're going to run yourself into the ground. He was on cue with that. I mean, he was. I was walking really down a road of destruction, and and it didn't have anything to do with drugs or anything like that, but it was just something that was going on in my life and things that were happening to me personally that I was having a hard time dealing with. And so now when I look back and I see it, and I mean, I think, gosh, I have to write this story, and it's been very difficult because some things that happened to me were unheard of, and it's very difficult. It was hard to write.
2 questions, and we're going to wrap this up. One, am I hearing like there was some abuse type of thing? And I don't say that because I can speak from experience, but
not from Prince.
No, I'm not saying from Prince. No, I'm just saying.
Yeah, well,
okay. You don't got to go into it.
There were lots of things, but I will say that my book will address bullying and take it to another level. It will deal with the issues that were going on in the 60s and 70s and 80s with busing.
Okay, yep.
And how light-skinned black people at the time during the Black Power era were not always welcome. And labels were put on me, labels were put on him. He was bullied, I was bullied. And we had a lot of things in common that we talked about. And that's why, that's why I think the book is really important. And I will say this, I need to add this, is that after we met again at the concert, my husband, we didn't wait around, and we went to the after party. Well, Prince didn't come for like probably 2 hours. So my husband was like, look, I got to go to work in the morning. Prince is notorious. So I didn't get to see him. So I get a call a couple of weeks later from Jerome Benton. And Jerome said, hey, May, you should go to Paisley Park. You should come home. And I said, why? He said, the Time's going to open for Prince in June. You should come. And I said, yeah, I should come. So I went by myself. I drove to Minneapolis, and I bought tickets for 3 after parties, and I went to the concert. And I did get a chance to talk to Prince. Yep.
I will hopefully save that conversation for the book, or maybe you don't.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a chance to talk. Unfortunately, here's something interesting too, Michael. I realized I saw Prince for the first time again in 24 years in April. He died in April.
Is this book this year or next year?
It's probably going to be next year.
Okay.
My editors we're supposed to start doing the editing at the end of September. I'm already starting to gather things to give them. I think it's really good for me to write about what was going on in Minneapolis, and because I have an insight of the civil rights era too, and my grandfather and all that was going on, I'm tying those things together and showing people what it was really like to live there, especially as a person who was mixed. My grandmother was Italian, my grandfather was black, my great-grandfather was Norwegian on my dad's side. So I'm just like Obama, I'm just a mutt. I just have all this stuff going on. So it was really hard for me. I was raised black. We had a black church. But, I dealt with a lot of issues. Like I would try to put sponge curlers in my hair to have an afro. I would wear the red, black, and green wristbands. I never thought of myself other than black. But I want to give people that feel of what it was like to live in Minneapolis, what it was like to go to the club, to go to the Foxtrot, to hear the music, what it was like to go to First Avenue when it wasn't First Avenue, what it was like to hang out at the lakes, the way over north. I really want to give people a feel from a woman's perspective, because all these other books have been written from a male's point of view. And that's what I'm trying to do. So Prince is a part of the book, and he's been a big part of my life. And of course, he's written songs about me, even more than I knew at first. So, after he passed away, there were others, even early, it just blew me away. That's all I have to say about it. Because I never really knew that he felt, there were the things like, if you just watch The Sign of the Times, and he he adds Little Red Corvette in there. You saw that, right, Mike? And he sings a little verse or two of Little Red Corvette. And he goes, "You're moving too fast." And then at the end, he goes, "But could I be that love?"
We're going to end it right there because
right.
I know where you're going to go with that. I want you to say that.
No, I'm not going nowhere. I'm just saying that I was listening to the song with a whole different attitude when I was younger, and now I see it as something different.
All right. Mei-Ling, where can people find or get in contact with you online? I know you're on Facebook, right?
Yeah, I'm like, crazy with Facebook. I have a Minneapolis Sound News Facebook account, and then a Mi-Ling Stone Poole, and then a Mei-Ling, because that one's almost full now. So, and then I have Instagram is Speak to Mimi, Speak, and the number 2, and then Mimi. That's my nickname, my niece and nephew. And then I'm on Twitter at Mei-Ling S Poole without the dash in the middle. So
okay. All right.
That's where I am.
Well, I so appreciate it. We all appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. Very anxiously awaiting reading your memoir, your book here. You're going to add a lot of context, another layer to the Prince story in Minneapolis, which I think is cool. Going around the room, Mr. Rodney, and you've been quiet, but we appreciate you sitting in with us, sir. Where can people find you online?
You get Old Friends for Sale with the number 4 on Instagram, Rodney Fitzgerald on everything else, Facebook, Twitter. And I had questions, but I guess they're for the book. So she beat me to it.
All right. Mr. Ant Pooh, where can they find you on?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Pooh.
Is your last name Poole? Or am I hearing it right?
Yes, you are.
That's another podcast.
Is it Poole?
That's his street name.
Yeah.
Okay.
My niece gave me that nickname.
Okay.
I gave her a Winnie the Pooh bear, and she said I was her Pooh bear.
Okay.
Wow. Now, see, I was trying to give you some of that South Central props. I was going to say he got jumped in, and he was like Ant Pooh, but he had to go Disney. So yeah, it is.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, let me be the gangster.
Okay. Also, Mr. Big Sexy and Sack, where can they find you, sir?
I can be found at WSE Mark on Twitter and Mark Wiggins on Facebook.
All right. And Kanisa, where can they find you?
I am Darling Nisi on Tumblr and Twitter, and have to do a quick pub for welcometothedawn.net. That is an information portal for Prince-related things, so it's kind of like a card catalog. You can search by tag, whether it's a book or a commentary or different things like that, and that is at welcome2thedawn.net.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for listening. Shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. And if you can, please go to our Patreon page and sign up and help support the show. We've got some exclusive content over there. Also, check us out on Facebook. Just look up Podcast Juice, and also on Twitter at Podcast Juice. My name is Michael Dean. Work it like a job. We'll see you next time. Peace. All righty. Thank you.